TCI is brought to you by TaylorMade Stallions, home of astrology, Escandarea, forestry, Northern Afleet, and Old Fashioned.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Breeders' Cup. Alongside Joel Cunningham, I'm John Siegel. Joel, with no win in your in races on the docket this weekend, let's take a few minutes and reboot a couple of the top fives.
Yeah, man, and we'll also launch a top five for the Dirt Mile because I think you're going to get a lot of crossover in these three divisions. The 3-0 Classic males, the older Classic males, and the Dirt Mile. I think there's a lot of crossover there, John, because some of these horses aren't going to prove to handle a mile and a quarter by the time November comes along, and some of them may be a cut below. So connections are going to, probably weigh their options strongly between these two divisions, primarily going into November, both very quality races.
All right, well, let's start off with the top five for the 3-year-olds in the Classic division. We talked quite a bit last week about this, but I see that you leave Orb in at number 1. Are you concerned at all with the fact that he has not shipped to Saratoga yet?
I am concerned because we saw him Derby week plenty. I mean, he's a, more of a slab-sided, slider-made kind of colt. So he's one that doesn't carry a lot of weight, John, and I really feel like the Triple Crown grind is one that you would think would get to a horse like Orb. And maybe that's why he was a little flat in both the Preakness and the Belmont. And the Belmont, you question whether or not he may have fired there, just maybe didn't kick home well in a mile of half race where deep closers are at a disadvantage. But I just think at a mile and a quarter, he's still your best 3-year-old, John, when given proper spacing in between races in a fair pace scenario. I still think he's the class of this group at a mile and a quarter, which is where the Breeders' Cup Classic is run. So for now, I'm going to keep him at number 1, but I am concerned. I mean, let's face it, he might not be back in Shug's barn and under his care in New York for another week. And we're coming up on the Travers in the 24th, John. I mean, he literally might have one work over that track under the care of his trainer coming into a huge race 10 furlongs off a layoff. So I am concerned about that.
Well, in fairness, too, I read, this week that they say the horse is thriving at Fairhill. That's one reason why they don't want to move him. So I don't want people to think that we're saying the horse is not doing well at Fairhill. They do say he's thriving, but I understand your concern that he's not under Shug's care right now.
Well, exactly. I mean, he is the trainer of the horse, and he doesn't see him. I mean, it's basically an exercise rider that has a regiment set up for this horse and is gauging his development. So a little concern there, obviously, from the standpoint that Shug's in New York. He's obviously not in Maryland.
All right, we had two horses that have they've come off the list this week, and that's Oxbow and Normandy Invasion. Oxbow, we talked last week, he came up with a little soft tissue injury, but Normandy Invasion, why has he come off the list?
Yeah, I think another horse that's injured, John, has that foot problem back on the farm. We won't see him again until his 4-year-old year, so the Normandy Invasion fans are going to have to wait until 2014 as a 4-year-old because I think he's done for the year. And obviously Oxbow not running well in the Haskell, John, and coming up with a little injury there. He may come back, but for right now he does not belong on a list of colts that I think are going the right direction to make a real presence in that Breeders' Cup Classic in November.
All right, well, let's move now to the older males in the Classic division. We saw a lot of movement this weekend because the Whitney, we saw cross traffic. Very impressive in here. This is a horse that's lightly raced but has shown tremendous talent. But my question is, did he do enough to move to the number 1 spot on the TCI top 5?
He didn't. I still like my evaluation on cross traffic. I mean, a highly talented colt. Wasn't surprised at all that he won the Whitney, John, particularly the way that race unfolded. With Fort Larned breaking a step tardy, it almost reminded me of the Breeders' Cup Classic a little bit, to where you expected this great speed duel, if you remember the Breeders' Cup Classic, between Fort Larned and Game On Do that day. Game On Do breaks tardy, at least Fort Larned, a quality horse, on the front end by himself, running very comfortably. He was able to win that day. Same thing here. Fort Larned breaks tardy, and it leaves a very talented colt, first time around 2 turns, cross traffic, on a very easy opening quarter. And once he got down the backstretch, they did pick it up. But for a colt like this, to not get that, sort of duel with a quality horse like Fort Larned early by the fact that he didn't break well, that really set up well for him. And I think there's plenty left in the tank here, John. I think he started goofing around in the stretch. I mean, he made the lead. Maybe he heard the roar of the grandstand, started, maybe saw the grandstand and sort of drifted out a little bit there. But he looked like he was still a little green, maybe even pulled himself up a little bit. So I think there's a lot more left in the tank here. It was a quality win, 107 Brisk number here. So I'm going to keep him in the 3 spot because I still have a concern at a mile and a quarter. Is he better suited for the Dirt Mile, or can he get that extra 1/8 of a mile? I think it's a big concern whether or not he can be a Breeders' Cup Classic hopeful.
Well, you got Painter in at number 1. We're going to see him in Saratoga. It sounds like they're going to run him in the Woodward. Game On
against
Dude.
cross traffic.
Yeah, it's going to be a great race. Game On Dude moves up to number 2. But I want to talk about a horse you move in on the list. That's Gradar. He showed a lot of brilliance in the Don earlier this year. Went on to win the New Orleans Handicap. Been off for a while. Joel, you moved him on the list in the number 4 spot.
I mean, he would have been on the top 5 all along had he been in training. But now that I've seen with my own eyes that he is back in training, and I had the privilege of seeing this horse train at WinStar as well, John, he just looks tremendous. You look at his early season form. I mean, you saw the 111 BRIS rating there. I mean, here's a colt that has already shown how brilliant he was to win the Don the way he did. Almost set a track record going a mile at Gulfstream earlier in the meet. Come out of a 1X and you win the Don the way you did with that big BRIS number. And then you go on the road and win a race like the New Orleans Handicap from off the pace, running down Mark Valesky, the local horse that was in form there. I was extremely impressed, and he's a colt that on quality has to be put in the top 5 now that he's back pointing towards the Classic. But again, he's another one of those that you do question a little bit. Is he better suited for a mile, or is he better suited to handle the 1.25 mile distance? And again, it's very questionable. I'm not sure that beyond the top 2 here, and then Fort Larned, obviously, you have to wonder if that distance is going to fit a couple of these horses.
Well, I think we're going to see the questions answered. We're going to, Todd Pletcher came out this week and said that they may run this horse in the Kelso, and then they also have a race at Churchill Downs. So I think that's going to tell a lot where they're going to point the horse when they decide where to run him back.
Yeah, absolutely. In Clubhouse Ride, I made a total over-evaluation on him, as well as Power Broker in that last list for 3-year-olds. I don't think they're obviously as good as I originally thought they were. Clubhouse Ride's totally tailed off, so he's off the list. And I think now Mucho Macho Man, an encouraging run by him. Successful Dan, an encouraging run by him in the Whitney as well, John. They start becoming players again. And of course, the horse that beat Painter, Kettle Corn with blinkers on, that's his home track over there at Santa Anita. So those horses are also player in what's shaping up to be a very good older male division.
All right, well, let's move to the dirt mile because we're going to see several horses, cross over like you mentioned,
right.
Not trying to do a play on words there with cross traffic, but look, we see him. He got him at a number 1 in the mile.
Well, this is a 2-turn mile on the dirt. Typically, Santa Anita favors speed. Especially a horse that has the cruising speed like Cross Traffic, in my opinion, that can take the heat and keep on going. So for me, I think he's tailor-made for that racetrack and for that 2-turn mile. So I'm going to have him in at number 1. Verrazano, another colt that I just think is a supreme miler. Certainly doesn't have probably the flashy cruising speed that Cross Traffic does, but on quality, based on his efforts that we've seen at middle distances, you have to have him in the conversation in the top 3, in my opinion. Then obviously Gradar. I mean, again, when you look at Cross Traffic and Gradar, it's hard to really separate these colts.
Right.
I mean, by running style, by looks, the fact that they're brilliant horses by Unbridled Song. I mean, really, those 3 are interchangeable for me at a middle distance. Successful Dan, I mean, I mentioned him. I mean, he looks like Wise Dan. He looks like a perfect 8-9 furlong, high-class Grade 1 horse, except he's a little better on the dirt. Wise Dan, obviously, better on synthetic and the turf. So Successful Dan, I do think him coming back in November, he could be a player from off the pace in that mile. And then Martin Valesky, I mentioned him. I think he's tailor-made for a 2-turn mile. He's an off-the-pace sorter. He can stalk kind of like Successful Dan. So if there's speed confrontation there that were to back up with Verrazano on Cross Traffic, Martin Valesky's a horse that I think is perfectly fit for this division.
And where do you think we'll see Mark Valesky next time out?
Well, he wrenched an ankle. We were going to see him in the Monmouth Cup. Didn't get to see him there, but supposedly it's a very minor injury. So I would expect to see him back fairly soon and expect him to at least get one good prep in before the Breeders' Cup.
Well, you mentioned Successful Dan there in this list, and at number 4. His brother also runs this weekend in the 4-Star Dave, so that's going to be an exciting race. What do you think about his chances?
Yeah, absolutely. And Charlie Presti says he's as good as ever, so that's bad news for his rivals there. I tell you what, the one thing that you see here, this is in the driving rain. You see the rain in this photo. He might wind up having to run over a soft course. But he's shown that he can handle that, John. He's shown that he can handle anything. So it's really hard for me to see that if Wise Dan gets the sort of trip to where he's not in trouble, it's hard for me to envision another horse beating him right now if he's in top form.
Well, there's more bad news for another set of rivals, and that's that Groupie Doll is going to run in the Gardenia. What do you think about her chances and her comeback?
Well, we talked to Buff, and he said that she's ready to run now, but he may wait to the Masters. So the fact that they're putting her in the Gardenia means that she's probably tearing the barn down, ready to go. But it is 2 turns first time back against a full field. She totally outclasses the group, but I don't think it'll be an easy race if she runs in any sort of traffic trouble going 2 turns off the bench on that track against, again, a full field in there.
All right, thank you, Joel. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you come back next week. We'll recap these races. We'll also launch you a new top 5.
Play the $50,000 Summer Showdown at TwinSpires.com. Through September 1st, parlay winning $10 show bets into thousands. But only when you play at TwinSpires.com, where players win.